Hey YouTube, welcome back. This tutorial or this video is going to be how to make these tote bags, which I love. I have tote bags for everything because I have a lot of projects and I like to have all the stuff for a project in a tote bag. That way if I have to go somewhere that I know I'm going to have to wait for a while, I can grab a bag and I have something to do while I wait. So what I really need is one big wall of pegboard to like hang all my bags, but that's a whole other project. So let's just talk about how to make these tote bags. They are so easy, you won't be able to stop. First, let's talk about what kind of fabric you're going to use. I usually like to use a duck cloth fabric. These are made out of quilting cotton and it can be done. I'll show you how to do that, but it has to be worked with first. What I usually like to use is a duck cloth or a home decor fabric, something that's pretty stiff and really substantial, you know, because you don't want your bag to stretch all out of whack like it will with a really soft fabric. So this duck cloth is my pick, and it comes in such cute prints now. And then you can get, you're gonna need one fabric for the outside and one for the lining. And I usually choose like a coordinate, but you can do the same fabric if you want to. This one had a farm print on the outside and then like a barn kind of print, wood print for the inside. So if you choose not to use the duck cloth, let's say, and I've got one here I'm going to work on. I got this is quilting cotton and it's very soft. So if you choose to use a soft fabric, you can do it, but you need to stabilize it first. And the way you do that is there's this stuff called Craft Fuse by Pellon, P-E-L-L-O-N, and it's an iron-on stabilizer. It's really stiff. It's real stiff. One side is like shiny, that's the side you iron on, and then the other side is flat. Now I do want to warn you, there's a difference between fusible interfacing and fusible web. So the fusible interfacing is what we're going to want. Number one, make sure you get fusible because there is also a sew-in that does not have the iron-on side. You just have to sew that stuff to the fabric, and I mean, you can use it, but I don't care for it. Fusible web, this just goes to one side of the fabric and it makes it stiffer. It makes it more sturdy. Fusible web, you put it in between two fabrics you want to stick together. Like if you want to put an applique on a fabric, you got your fabric, you've got your fusible web, and you have your other fabric, and it sticks them together. It like glues two pieces of fabric together. It's wonderful stuff. But it's not what you want for this application. What you want is Pellon Craft Fuse, and it'll say that on here. Now there are a ton of other kinds of interfacing that are, some are stiffer, some are more lightweight. It just depends on the look that you're going to want for your bag. Now back to fabrics. I would not suggest a knit or anything really stretchy at this point. Now yes, you could iron on some interfacing and that's going to stiffen it up. But I would say, you know, if you're not a big bag maker, then you need to stick with preferably a duck the first time, and then we can move into a softer cotton. And if you're a professional bag maker, then you're probably not watching this video anyway. So that's just my suggestion. I am going to show you how to iron the interfacing onto a cotton so you'll know how to stabilize it. Now I'm gonna make a particular bag with particular measurements, but I'm going to show you along the way how you can adjust your measurements to make a bag any size you want to. Okay, it's going to be a lot of fun, so come hang out with me for a little while and we'll make a bag. Okay, so here we are. The first thing we're going to do is cut the fabric. And I don't want anybody to stress out over this. Just let this be a fun project. But I always like to straighten the top of my fabric because sometimes you get a good cutter and sometimes you don't. So to make sure that you have a straight top line, you want to line up the edge of your fabric. That's going to be your guide. And I can see this is not bad off at all. It wouldn't be bad if you just went with this. But now that I have this on a straight line, I'm going to pick a line up here, line up my ruler, and cut. Now I have a nice straight line. Okay. You can adjust the size of these bags to anything you want to. And after you watch me make one, you'll be able to see, you know, what you want to do. Now, the length here is going to determine how tall the bag is. So for the bag I'm going to make, I'm going to cut it 14 inches deep. So let me measure 14 inches. That's right here. If you do not have a cutting mat and a long ruler, that would probably be a great thing to treat yourself to. They are a little expensive, but if you're going to sew, this makes it really nice. So now I cut straight across here. So what I have at this point is a piece of fabric that is 14 inches this way, and it is 44 inches wide because that's the width of the fabric. And I'm going to cut a piece of the liner the same size. Okay, this fabric has a definite direction, a directional print, and it's off right here. So I'm going to straighten that right along that stripe. Just line it up on both ends and quick as a whistle. Cut straight across. Is right here. Just like that. Now we're through cutting. So now what we have is two pieces of fabric that are 14 inches this way and width of fabric or WOF the other way. Okay, and that's all the cutting that we have to do for now. So let's get the sewing machine out and get started with that. Now we're going to take each piece of fabric and fold it over with right sides together, and we're going to trim off these selvages on the side. That's, you know, about 1/2 inch on both pieces. Just real quick. You don't have to be super exact. You can see where the selvage of a fabric ends. So just find yourself a place there and trim off the first one. Now we do need to make sure that our fabrics stay the same size. So I'm going to put the fabric that I just cut on top of the other piece of fabric. Measure up my folded edges there. And I'm actually going to have to cut a little bit more off of that first fabric because it was not through the selvage. Okay, so now I have trimmed both pieces of fabric. Neither one has the selvage, and they are exactly the same size. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to sew the side seam right along here for each piece, except on the liner we're going to leave a gap right here in the center. So I'm going to go ahead and mark off. I usually like to leave about 2 inches. So just right there close to the seam line, I'm going to mark, and it doesn't really matter where. You're going to close this up eventually. This is just so you can turn the bag inside out. So a 2 to 3 inch gap, just somewhere in the middle of the lining fabric seam. All right, so we're ready to do our first seam. I'm going to use the 1/2 inch seam allowance guide over here. It doesn't matter which one you use as long as you are consistent. I feel like a 1/2 inch gives me plenty of leeway, and 5/8 is a little bit of overkill, so I go with 1/2 inch. Make sure that your stitch selector guide is on one of your straight stitches. I'm going to use stitch number 9 because this is a really dense fabric, and that's going to be good enough. So I have stitch number 9. You could go with 8 if you want to, but I'm going to go with 9. My tension is at 4. I have plenty of thread and bobbin. And so with my edge lined up at the 1/2 inch, I'm going to put my foot down. I'm going to turn the wheel by hand so that the needle goes in, and then I'm just going to sew a couple of stitches forward. Then I'm going to hold down the reverse button over here and go backwards all the way to the edge, and then turn it loose, and I'll be going forward now all the way. And since this is the liner, I'm going to stop right there at my mark. And you don't have to, get all in a wad about it. Then I'm going to reverse a couple of stitches to end that seam. Now, just pick up your foot. Make sure your needle is in upper position, and you can just pull your fabric on down to the next mark or close to it. A lot of times I just eyeball this distance. So you're just putting a gap in it, but you don't have to pull the fabric out and start all over again. So once again, put the needle in. Now I'm going to go a couple of stitches forward, and then hold down the reverse, go back those 3, and then I'm going to go all the way to the end. Almost to the end, and then I'm going to hit that reverse, couple of stitches, and then on off. Raise your needle, raise your foot, pull it out, and cut. So now we have the first one, and we have that gap right there. That's so we'll be able to turn this inside out. And you might want to go ahead and leave 3 inches in yours. I'll manage to make it work with 2, but 3 might be better on a thick fabric. Now, the outside fabric, I'm not going to skip. I'm just going to sew all the way down the edge. So, lining it up at that 1/2 inch seam allowance, going a little bit past there. Turn the hand wheel, put your needle in, go forward a couple of stitches, then hold down the reverse, go back all the way to the edge, and then let it go forward again. And we're going to go straight down to the end. Then we're going to reverse a couple and then go off. Needle up, foot up, fabric out, and cut. And that's the first step. Our next step is going to be to sew across the bottoms of each one. Now on this liner fabric, it doesn't matter which side is the bottom because either way it works. So just pick one, and we are going to sew using that 1/2 inch seam allowance again. Let me make sure my raw edges are pretty even. Like I said, we're not going to stress ourselves. Now here we go. In. Okay, now on my outside fabric, it does matter which one is the bottom. So check your print, make sure, this is going to be my top. So I'm going to be sure to sew the other side. Just like I did there, 1/2 inch seam allowance, needle up, foot down, couple of stitches, reverse, and good to go all the way across. Now it is time to make the gussets. The gussets are those things on the bottom, the pleats, and that's what makes it have like a box-like bottom instead of just a pointed, bag. So we're going to need a gusset on each side of the liner and on each side of the outside fabric. Now it doesn't matter how big you make your gusset. I'll show you the difference in just a second. All that matters is that you are consistent. And this is what I mean. If you look at the gussets on the bottoms of these two bags, you can see this one has a big wide gusset. This one has a narrower gusset. So that's going to be, how wide your bag is. And keep in mind, when you make a wider gusset, it's going to shorten your bag just a little bit. That's why this one's kind of short and wide and this one's tall and thin. But that is what is so fun about making your own bag, because you can adjust that to accommodate what you want. So this is how you make a gusset. Now this is your bottom seam, and here's your side fold, and here's your side seam. What we want to do is open this out, and you want to line up, first of all, spread it out good, and I did press my seams, so you might want to do that. Okay, so you're going to line it up, and this is kind of fiddly. Sometimes it helps if you open out this seam so you can feel it better. Okay, now I have this seam is right on top of this seam underneath it, okay? And you want to get that flat to the corner, open that out, and then open this one out, and my seams are right on top of each other, okay, all the way down. It's very important that you get them right on top of each other so you'll have a nice gusset. Now you're going to take a ruler, and this is where these quilting rulers come in so handy, because you can make sure that you get it straight. Now on this I can see the line, so I'm going to do a 3-inch-ish gusset. Like I said, it's not so important how big the gusset is. It's just important that once you make one, your other 3 gussets are the same. They have to be the same. So if I'm going to do this, I've got the 1, 2, 3 inch mark right here at the very corner of that seam, and then I'm just going to mark across and across, and going to hold that still while I get my pins. I'm going to pin here and here, so that when I move this over to the sewing machine, it doesn't get misaligned. Now let's go over here to the other side. Now this side, turn it this way, you don't have a seam down here, you just have the crease. So I usually put the crease on top. It's a little bit easier to feel what I'm doing, and open out this bottom pleat. If you want to, you can make a little nick down here at the bottom so you can open that out a little easier. And I'm going to spread that out, then fold it right there at the corner, and I'm feeling under there so I can feel the seam and make sure that it is aligned with that crease. That's also why you might want to go ahead and press the side of your bag before you do this, and then pop it up and look. I can feel this seam, and I can feel that this seam is right on top of it. Okay, that's what we're going for. So now I used a 3-inch on that one. I'm going to come down 1, 2, 3 here, and then I'm going to line this up right with that crease. Go across and across, and then pin. And pin. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the outer fabric. I'm gonna just snip a little bit of that so I can open that seam out, and I'll get it started there. And there's really no quick and easy way to do this. You just kind of have to feel your way through it. So I have the bottom seam opened out and flattened open, and I can feel that this crease is going right along that seam underneath it. So get that straightened out, and then I'll get my ruler. 1, 2, 3 inches down there to the corner. Make my line and pin and pin, and one more time right here. Open those out. Open that out on the bottom. that down flat. Flatten out the top. And I'm gonna smooth it around. Make sure it's really, oops, got a kink in it there. So you want to make sure that it's starting at the corner there and that underneath you're flat. And on top you're flat. And a little bit of practice goes a long way on this. The more you do it, the quicker you get. So I have that, and let's do up 1, 2, 3 from my seam. Let me make sure this line is straight and I don't have any gaps under there. I want to make sure all this fabric is flat, because you get a little wrinkle under there and it will mess up. I mean, it's not going to mess it up. You probably wouldn't even be able to tell it, but you know. Alright, so here we go. And one more time. And then let's go to the sewing machine and stitch those down. So here we are, ready to stitch the gusset. We have it marked, we have it pinned, so we're just going to be following that line all the way across. Move over a little bit. Sink your needle. We're going to do a couple forward and then a couple backwards. And then go all the way across. Pull the needles out or the pins out before you sew over them, please. And you do want to check and make sure that your seam is flat on the other side when you go over it. And close to the end, I'm going to reverse a couple and then go straight off. Okay, now let's do that to the other 3. Now we have sewn the gussets, it's time to trim the gussets. That triangle where you just sewed across there, you're going to cut that excess off. Okay, don't be scared. Just about 1/2 inch from there, and you can just eyeball it. We're just going to cut across. Okay, and then we're going to do this to the other side, about 1/2 inch. And we're also going to do it to the front fabric and the other side. Now's a good time to trim your threads down here. Make it all nice and neat. Okay? So here's where we are. We have the outer fabric sewn together and the gussets done, and the liner fabric sewn together and the gussets done. You're going to take your liner fabric and you're going to turn it right side out. Okay, not both of them, just the liner. And make sure you poke out your edges there and get it all nice and turned. Now you're going to take this and you're going to put it inside of your outer fabric, and you want to be sure that your seam sides are together. So here's the seam on my liner and here's the seam on my outer fabric, and I'm going to pin those, making sure my top edges are even, and then I try to catch the seam allowance over here and the seam allowance on this side, and then I also do that on the other side. because sometimes when you're sewing over those, they'll get all flapped up. So, all right, now go over to the opposite side. I have to shake it out a little bit. Now over here where your, and what I'm looking for here is the crease. Here it is. This is the middle crease here. I want to line it up with this crease, and I'm going to give it a stretch so that it's lined up really well. And I'm going to pin here. Now we need to put the straps in place. Our next step sewing wise is going to be to sew all the way around here, and that's going to make a nice edge, but we need straps. Now you can make your own, and I'm going to show you how to do that in the next video where I do the bells and whistles of bags. But for now, what I have is this webbing. I really like to use this, and it's not real expensive. It was like $1.99 a yard. And I got it when it was on sale. Every other week it's on sale. But anyway, it's not expensive at all. This is the 1.5 inch webbing, and it's really nice. It fits good on your shoulder. So anyway, that's what I'm going to use. I cut these 19 inches long, each one, so I'd have a little bit of leeway with it. Now we're going to tuck this, and what we need to do here is mark where we're going to put them so that they wind up at the same place. I'm going to go in, all right, see, here's going to be the side of your bag. So I'm thinking about right here. Once you find one spot, just measure. So if I go in, let's say 6 inches on this side. Measure while I'm putting it in there. So I'm going to go, you know what, my ruler is 6 inches wide, so that will simplify things. Alright, so right here, and I'm going to put this outer edge at 6 inches, and I'm going to pin it. Then I'm going to drop that in between the liner and the outside fabric, because when you turn it, that's where you want it to be. So I'm laying it flat, and then I want to be 6 inches from this edge as well. So I'm going to get my ruler and hold it up here, and then 6 inches there. And you don't have to be, you know, extremely upset about 1/8 of an inch or so. But anyway, this is what it looks like. Okay, I have it pinned to the outside front of my bag, and I made sure that there's no crinkle in the rope. Okay, now I'm going to come back up. Now I'm going to get my liner, and I'm going to pull the pin back out. This time I'm going to go through the front part, the strap, and then the lining part. So now my strap is sandwiched in between my outer fabric and my liner fabric. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing over here. Pin out and put it back in, and then I'm going to turn around and do the other side the same way, and keep tugging on your top so that you're not, you know, getting it misaligned. But we're going to go 6 inches from this one, so that's going to be right there. And I'm going to pin this just to the front fabric. And I'm going to put that on the inside and come back up here and let me get 6 inches from this side, which will be right there. Okay. And get the liner lined up there. Do this all in one step this time. Okay. Now I'm going to go back around and I'm going to put some pins. Oops, I didn't catch it in that one. I'll put a couple of more pins, like just in between here, just to be sure. And then we're going to get the machine. We're just going to sew all the way in a complete circle, all the way around the top of this bag. Okay, y'all, we're almost finished. Now, if you have a free arm on your machine, now's a great time to use it. So I've already taken the attachment off of here. And I'm just going to put my bag top under here. And with this top, I'm just going to align my raw edge with the side of my foot over here. That's going to give me about a 3/8 inch seam allowance, which will be plenty for this because I'm going to turn it. So once you have it under there, we're ready to, and there's no need to reverse and forward on this part because you're going to sew completely back over it. So we'll do that when we get back around. Now, once you get it under there, we're just going to start sewing. Now, when I get to the strap, I do reverse and go over it twice just to make sure that that's in there really good. So I'm going to take my pin out and I'm going to let it go completely over where the strap is. Getting my edges even. And then I'm going to reverse back over it. There's just a lot of stress on a strap and I don't want it to come out. So just give it a little extra attention there. And I'm going to continue that all the way around, reinforcing wherever the straps are. Now I'm at the end, so I'm going to meet up, and then I'm going to reverse and go back over it. Okay, lift the foot up, pull this out, and I usually look back around my whole edge, inside and outside, and make sure that I didn't lose my liner or my outside at some, because that does happen sometimes and you get all the way through and then you have a big gap. Now we're ready to turn it inside out. So go to your liner seam where you left the gap and you're just going to reach through this. I'm just clipping the thread. We're going to reach through this seam and we're going to pull out everything that's in there. And that's why I said I really should have left a larger than 2-inch opening on this one because this is really thick fabric. I probably should have done 4. So it's going to take me a little maneuvering to get all the fabric back out through that hole. And there we are. Now this is what you have. Something that looks like this. So now flip it up and tuck that liner inside your bag. Okay? Tuck it in there really good. Now we're going to go over to the ironing board and we are going to press this top seam down very carefully, because our next step is going to be to top stitch around this edge, and if I don't have it pressed nicely, I won't get a good top stitch. So here I am to press. Now you're going to roll it because you want to be sure that you're getting it even and that it's tight. You don't have any gaps there. So, and I missed it sometimes. I don't use water in my iron ever. So I keep a bottle of water handy to mist it, but you're just going to be rolling it until you get it nice and flat and sharp, and then you press that down. Okay? And then we're going to move on around to the next. You can give it a couple of spritz and roll it with your fingers to get a nice even edge. Iron that down. You know, when I was in high school, I took home ec, and my home ec teacher was a fabulous seamstress back in the day. And I always wondered why her things looked so much better than mine, because I had been sewing for quite a few years as it was. And then, come to find out, she told me, she says, well, you never press. I said, what do you mean? She says, I press all the time. And I, you know, when I got to looking, when I started paying attention, I saw that, yeah, she would sew a little bit and then she'd twirl around there to the ironing board and she'd press it. So I guess, you know, if you want what other people have, you have to do what other people do. So I started pressing a lot more often, and it really took my sewing to a whole new level. So pressing is important. Pressing is important. Your thread is important. You can get by with a lot of different sewing machines, but there's only one way to press. And this is just about got it here. We are just about done. Press this part, and then we're going to go back and we're going to top stitch all the way around that edge. Now you don't have to top stitch, it's going to stay, but that just gives it a nice finished look. Now I'll tell you something else that I'm going to do while I'm here at the ironing board. I'm going to open it up to where that seam was open in the liner, that opening, and I'm going to press it down now. It's kind of naturally turned under there. Well, I'm going to have to go in by hand and stitch that up. And if you have it turned under, it makes it really easy. So I'm just going to press that under there. Now maybe you'll be able to see. I just pressed it so that my seam is under there, so it's going to be easy for me to stitch that together by hand. Or you can run it, in fact I may do that, you can just run it right under the machine. It's on the inside, so no one's going to see it. And we are ready to do the top stitching. Now, some tips before you do this. Number one, check your bobbin thread and make sure that you have plenty of thread. There is nothing more aggravating than getting part way through a top stitching job and your bobbin runs out, because that's going to show. I always go to my longest straight stitch length, so I'm going to turn it to the 10 on my pattern selector dial, and you're just going to go slow. Okay, start, And I always, for top stitching, I use the edge of my foot again. You want something that's very easy to stay consistent. And you're just going to go slow because a sloppy job of top stitching always shows. So sink your needle. You're not going to reverse over this one either. You'll come back around. And we're ready to go. If you find that you're getting some puckers, just try to go more slowly, and you can stretch the bag by pulling the front and the back. Just make sure you're not pulling it to or away from the needle. Grab two different places and kind of stretch it to ease out that fullness. And I'm just going to go 2 or 3 stitches over the beginning of the seam, then pull out and clip. Now you can turn over on the back and tug on those bobbin threads, and then you can pull the thread from the front to the back. There we go. And then you can tie these two in knots, and you'll have a perfectly finished seam on the front. No loose ends and no knotting. So just tug on the bobbin thread. It pulls up a loop from the front, and then you can pull it to the back and knot it. Now, your only thing left to do is finish this seam on the side. And like I said, you can either whip stitch it by hand. I think for this one, I'm just going to pinch it together like this, and I'm just going to sew it under my, sew it by machine. And you know what? I bet if you go pull a bag out of your closet and look at the liner, you will be able to find where they actually did this as well. Now on this seam, you will want to back up and reinforce it a couple of stitches and then go forward. Let me find my edge there. We're going to go forward. Make sure you haven't got anything caught up in there, and then go backwards a few. Okay? And now we're going to cut that off and clip those threads. And let's see what we have here. So here is our finished product. Just like this. Look how cute this is. Now, when you get ready to make your own bag, just remember your gusset is what's going to determine how wide this bottom is. We did 3 inches here. So if you do a 2-inch gusset or even a 1-inch, you're going to get a narrow bag. It's not going to be as wide as this one. If you do a 4-inch or a 5-inch or however many, it's going to be a fatter bag. We also cut this one 14 inches. So if you want a taller bag, go more. Do 20 inches, do 30 inches. If you want to make a huge bag, You know, we were limited by the width of the fabric on this. Cut 2 strips and sew it together. Then you can make a bag that is double this big. If you want to know how to do some other things with a bag, I'm going to show how to put pockets on the inside, a pocket on the outside, a closure, and I'll show you how to do one out of a cotton fabric where you have to interface it with the iron-on interfacing. So I'm going to do that in a video called Bells and Whistles of Tote Bags. So I appreciate y'all hanging with me and helping me make this bag. I hope that you have great success making your own bag. So let me know how yours turns out in the comments below, and be sure and hit that subscribe button. Thank y'all so much. I'll see you next time. Bye.